I'm Carol Owens, and this is Stockbridge Updates. You know what? Nowhere is it written that if you say hello to me in the post office, I say hello back. Nowhere is it written down. You can check all the books. That if you say, how are you? I say, fine. And you? You know why we do it? Not because it's law, because it's courtesy. We do it to be nice. It's interesting that when we talk about the Stockbridge way, at the bottom, all it is being nice. John Biacco called it living a dignified and caring life. Mary Flynn called it the Stockbridge way. So at the basis of the Stockbridge way is niceness. Nowhere is it written that you rotate the chairmanship of the select board. It was a Stockbridge decision because it's nice. Gives everybody a fair and equal opportunity to be the chair, to learn about what that's like. They were all equally elected, and they all get a turn. It's just nice. John Biacco and Mary Flynn served this town on the select board for 20 years, from the 1970s to the end of the 1990s. 20 years. During that time, Mary never served as chair. You know why? She was the first woman on the select board, and she didn't want to. She felt like she got to be the first woman on the select board, and that was good enough. She wasn't going to push it one more step and be chair. Well, it was her choice, and John Biacco, being a gentleman, every time she asked, said, well, okay, Mary, but really and truly, I wish you'd do it. And she'd say, now, darling. And so John would take it. Terry Flynn reminded us that there was a time more recently that Don Chabon took the chair for Terry Flynn because he had trouble with his heart, was hospitalized, and it was the best thing for him. When someone took another person's turn, it was out of, oh, wait, niceness. Everyone will have to decide for themselves about the select board meeting last week, June 6th. The June 6th select board meeting. But one thing it possibly wasn't was nice. And maybe, just maybe, the real victim of all that is Stockbridge. At any rate, we're going to find out all about it because I have the distinct pleasure of having for a guest Patrick White. Hey.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good.
So we're here to talk about the Red Sox. I heard they beat the Yankees 2-3 over the weekend.
That's it.
Right. I love that. I love that. Well, thank you. I consider this a bit of an exit interview. I'm going to return to trying to do some good work in the private sector, and I think that maybe right now that's a better fit for me.
I think that's marvelous, and we all look forward to seeing what you do next.
And I just wanted to start by saying what a thorough honor it was to serve the people of Stockbridge. There are so many great citizens, great stakeholders. Our boards have so many folks. I think of, agriculture and forestry and some folks on the planning. I think of like Liz Wheeler and Sally and Ron, and I think of Matt and Lisa Bizzuto, and I think of we have some tremendous town hall staff too. We've got Erica, who's just fantastic at her job. Christine, who within a few weeks of stepping into the role of the highway department got that amazing grant to create the walkway from Pine Woods to Church Street. Just showing initiative. We've got We've got, Michael Blay, who, he didn't always agree with me on some issues like RTE, but man, he's a great assessor. It was really a pleasure to work with one of the most skilled town administrators in the county, I think, and Michael Canales, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I just wanted to say, just to start off, what a pleasure it was to serve with all these folks. And, I always tried to, in any given year, 50 or 100 issues come up, and you're never going to agree with everyone on everything. That's not what it's about. It's about going through a process that gives people a chance to speak and gives people a chance to be heard or to hear, and helps inform the debate or discussion just through comedy and civility. And I tried to do that. I think it's gotten harder lately, and that was one of the reasons I was stepping aside.
Yeah, I wanted to say that everyone appreciates your expressing appreciation for the other people that work in the town. But you didn't leave because it was wonderful. Yeah. So what were some of the stumbling blocks or some of the things that guided your decision?
There's really a couple of things. One, the president's educated us all about prioritizing things like loyalty over responsibility, prioritizing fear and retribution, and I want to emphasize that with what I'm about to say, this isn't at all critical of the staff. The staff takes its cues from leadership. We have elected boards for a reason, but really kind of internally and externally, I wanted to just touch on a couple of things. Internally, I just know that we all have our supporters and detractors. It's politics. It's always going to be that way. I'll tell you this, though. If a town hall employee came out to hold a sign for me while I was running for something, they were a citizen of the town, I would have said to them, thank you so much, go in and vote, but I don't want you out here. And the reason for that is not that I don't want their support. Of course I want their vote. The reason is that it compromises their ability for the folks who might disagree with me to do their job the next day. And the job of the boards are after elections to bring people together, not further divide us. There's enough division right now in our country, and I obviously vacillated a little bit this week on whether I should try to kind of spend what was likely to be my last year on the board or step aside. And there was a really troubling incident when I went in Tuesday morning, and I heard that the chair had gone into the town administrator's office and said, what are you and your pal up to next, or something to that effect? What are you and your pal? Now, Michael and I talk to every single day. Michael's a good guy. I like Michael, and when I was going down to the BSO, I brought Michael along. When we had meetings, I tried never to take meetings alone, because I felt like it was the town administrator's job to not only represent the staff and the administration rather than the elected political leadership of the town, but also to inform my colleagues of what might have been done, because we've got to work collaboratively as a team. And I felt that the comment, you and your pal, indicated another troubling example of a second stage of the politicization of an apolitical staff, which was basically like, be careful who your allies are. Now, Michael and I agreed on some things, disagreed on some things. I never considered him an ally or an adversary. That's not his role. His role is apolitical. And it was really at that moment, on top of some other things, that I felt inclined to leave. I was frankly, I was so disappointed to be sitting up on that dais. Is that how you pronounce it? Dais?
Dais.
Dais, whatever, sorry. I read big words more than I speak them. At town meeting. Because here you had a moderator with an interest in Chapter 61 who was deciding whether or not folks would be able to speak. Now, we have a strange town. Only 2% of the houses in the country are second homes. But Stockbridge is about 50-50. And one of the challenges with that and opportunities, frankly, is to make sure that regardless of whether the state of Massachusetts lets people vote in local elections, like they do in Connecticut on certain topics like the budget, that people's voice are always heard. And and some members of the seasonal resident community didn't always agree with me on some of the issues, as you know. Always important for their voices to be heard, especially if they can't participate in other aspects of the political process. And my colleagues are all for, allowing people to speak when they agree with you, but maybe not so much when some of the people don't agree with you. And this was after, that the chair had asked town hall staff we got 18 letters one day related to that land acquisition that was voted down. And they asked the town hall staff to poll whether or not those 18 people were voters. Think about that for a second.
Let me just underscore a couple of things that I hear Patrick saying, and for heaven's sake, listen and correct if I didn't get it right. But that one of the things that was the most important to him is that non-political jobs not be politicized, that paid employees of town office do not overtly campaign for one candidate over the other. How smoothly would town office run if the other candidate had won? Then what? That the fact that someone cannot vote, which by the way is their choice, you can choose your primary residence in this country, but the fact that they can't vote should not hinder their involvement in other things. And back to that business about written law, in fact, it doesn't. Because while a non-voter cannot run for office, they can be appointed to committees, commissions, boards, and they certainly have equal rights to standing up at any meeting and speaking. And that these things, this direction that the town was taking was very troubling to you.
Yeah, I feel like we shouldn't be asking whether someone's a voter or not when they send a letter in. I just don't think that's right. And I'll tell you another thing, and I'm not alleging that this happened, but the problem with involving staff in politics is, we have a town administrator, not town manager model. That means that ultimately your select board, I shouldn't point to myself anymore, your select board decides employment status, basically whether you're hired or fired. It decides your compensation. It decides your review. It decides your budget, okay? So if a couple of people are out there campaigning, all right, does that impact the town administrator, who's maybe the direct report to some of those folks or their manager, in terms of the employment review? Does it impact whether or not other folks feel pressure to show their support in order to make sure that they have job security? There's a whole bunch of troubling implications down the road as you politicize a little bit things today. And it was that Powell comment, that implicit retribution for working with one of your colleagues, that I decided I really had kind of a problem being part of this team. I'll tell you another problem. The folks on the Red Line Inn, Main Street Hospitality, reached out to me about a wonderful plan to reinvent Main Street. BSO, Chad, generationally important leader at the BSO, reached out several months ago and invited me to Boston, and I brought Michael with me. And by the way, I made sure that folks knew I was going. Never made the agenda. And I heard there was a lot of anger and resentment. Oh, I don't know why he got asked. Well, I got asked because I spent 5 years building relationships with folks. My fear with some of these things is, does resentment then manifest itself in other types of retribution? For example, against partners of the town. You know, one of my big fears right now is the Mohegan community is going to ask us to hold the conservation restriction on Fenn Farm, because it's the law with that type of environmental grant that we got that a municipality or a state office hold the conservation restriction. I'm closely associated with those initiatives, and wasn't the only driver. We had wonderful folks who came before me, like Rick Wilcox, Rich Bradway, and a lot of folks have contributed to that relationship. But it's important to me, and I want and so now I found myself wanting to hold back to bring things before the board, because so often it seemed that if it came from me, there would automatically be opposition from at least one member of the board.
So that was within the context of how the board operated,
Yeah.
which sounds less cooperative than maybe the voters would like it to be, but it leads to another question for me, and that is, now that you have resigned, how do you envision your role? Do you envision yourself remaining involved in town issues, or putting that aside?
I don't think there's a yes or no answer. I think that what I'm certainly not going to do is provide running commentary to second guess the board. You have an elected board, you have appointed boards, and you have a town hall staff. If people want my opinion, they can call me, but I don't think you'll see me proactively offering that opinion. You know, it's not my intent to undermine the government. You know, I made a personal decision to focus my energies on really what I'm looking to do next is to associate myself with teams of excellence. I think that you know yesterday was, for example, the faculty dinner for the Berkshire Waldorf High School.
Right.
And it was the last time that dinner is going to occur on Pine Street. And I actually, in my little, we all goes around the table and everyone says something. And I said, I think we should thank this space that there were so many great memories in, and sort of like the karma of the space kind of thing. And I'll say this: a lot of folks didn't think that we could pull that off. We could go from a struggling nonprofit to an $8 million renovation of Old Town Hall, and the pictures at night with the lights on in the front and that gleaming paint, and it's so great on the inside. Call me up if you want a tour. That happened because a team of 3 folks, led by Steve Sagarin and chaired by Teresa Bryant, with my help, not my direct, I'm got to be at the top leadership, but with my assistance, we got that done. And I'm so proud of what that team accomplished, and I'm so proud, and I just acknowledge that excellence can do great things. It's always been the case.
And can do things that people for almost 20 years before said can't be done, tear it down.
Well, and it turned out it could be, and that's not it was tough to get it done. It was tough, but we did, and the larger point I'm making is I think there's other opportunities where my whatever my skills are better used. That strange recitation of the resumes at town meeting, which for me was kind of more about if there was a political disagreement, sort of one side of the table had stature and the other didn't. I founded several companies. I was CEO of 3 companies. I'm now the CFO of 2 nonprofits, and I am not nearly as accomplished as so many of the people in this town that I know. You included, Carol, but many, many others. We have so much talent in this town, so much talent. And if you want to know my resume, go to LinkedIn. I don't need that, and neither do the people of the town. People are up there because they were appointed or they were elected, and I don't know which of us have the strongest resume, and I don't care. We're there because we have official roles in town business, and it's just like kind of, once again, sort of the creeping politicization of town processes that was troubling to me. I was embarrassed that day.
For me, there's something equally troubling about the whole, let us pause for 15 minutes to listen to the resume of each finance committee member. And what is troubling for me is this. It's not about them. It's not about whether two town employees prefer one candidate over the other in the only contested race. It's not about their personal choice. You know what? To go back to where I started, it's about Stockbridge. And I hope everyone coming forward to volunteer or to run for office on every single board and committee is doing it for the town, not for themselves.
And you know, and look, I like to maybe spend the last couple of minutes pivoting toward the issues, because I've got, if this were an exit interview, I'd give you a little bit of advice. First, there's tremendous reasons to protect the character of the town, both kind of the human character, literally, but also the physical beauty and character of the town. I think that it is good for the environment. It is good for the economic vitality of the town. It is good for people's property values. I remain concerned that too much growth will have dire consequences to how it feels and how it looks and how what it takes to get around to the Main Street, but also, like, you know, even practical decisions, like at what point you'll need to upgrade the water and sewer plant if there's too much growth.
There are folks who would say to you, well, then how could you have voted for the system?
Yeah,
what was the balance?
We had capacity in the system for that. And I voted for, you know, look at, that was a preservation bylaw, and I personally negotiated a deal that involved preserving hundreds of acres of land and that front yard and what was left of the building that could be saved. That was a preservation bylaw, and I did exactly what I felt we should do. You concentrate development down on the 20, 25 acres down there, and you protect hundreds of acres up there, and I will always feel good about that. And I will break some news now, which is that no appeals came in, and the appeals deadline has passed. So, you know, I think that you know, in the 5 years I was on this board, the town preserved like over 800 acres, you know, and I was only peripherally involved in some of those. I was more involved in others. But, you know, the Fenn Farm acquisition by the Mohicans and the Stowe preservation by the Stockbridge Land Trust. Good job, Rich, and everyone on the Land Trust. You know, I think that we can have enough growth to keep our taxes low without ruining the scenic beauty and wildlife habitat that we cherish. Every picture I see on Facebook of a little mama bear, big mama bear with her little cubs gets the most likes of anything you'll ever see. People love wildlife. It's why they live around here. They love the land and the beauty and the mountains and the forests and the fields and the waters and all the rest of it. Cherish that, you know. And I just got to say, it's like kind of, you know, with regard to.
You want to say a quick word about Preservation Inc. and folks stepping up?
Let's not do that yet. Yeah, I'll let you break your own news. I do feel like that there is a parcel in general on Ice Glen Road that should be preserved. It is available for preservation. It links to an entire trail system on the west side of Beartown Mountain, and it is available now. And you know. Look, and I think that, you know, if you think about the things that I've tried to focus on, you know, there's a history with the trees up there. Those trees were there. Many of those trees are more than 300 years old. In Ice Glen, for example, and related patches of old growth forest up there. One of the reasons why I was so intent on protecting those trees is that, you know, Stockbridge was one of the first, if not the first, experiments in multicultural governance in at least Massachusetts, and perhaps beyond that. You're the historian, you tell me. You know, the fact that John Sargent and Conklin might have walked through that place with those trees alive always resonated for me of how special that was. The fact that in the ground there are, you know, are fungal and bacteria colonies that go back to the Ice Age, and that might hold the key to a future discovery, who knows, is really important to me. Protect those trees. And you know, I hope that folks recognize that that didn't happen by accident. That was on my calendar once a year to talk to Michael and say, make sure we do what we need to make sure those trees don't die, and that's happened for 5 years now, so I protect those trees. I think that, you know, we're gonna need to take a look at, obviously I support the idea of strengthening our EMS, our emergency medical. I would just say that there's several ways to do that, and it's going to be important to explore with rigor all the ways to do that so that we have the best delivery of service at a reasonable cost.
With a positive attitude, which Patrick White has attempted to model for 5.5 years in the face of whatever was going on, I'm going to invite him to come back so that we can talk about the issues that he was intimately familiar with and about which he may have some advice. But there'll come a time when the issues are new, even to him, and he will take a step back. And until then, thank you so much.
Can I make one last recommendation?
Sure.
I think that the town should really strongly consider a 5-member board. With a 3-member board, it's not legal for me to give a call to one of my colleagues and work out some of these issues. It's not legal for me to, you know, meet in secret. With a 5-member board, 2 members can get together. And I think that one of the solutions to some of these kinds of conflicts is a more formal board structure with more talent and with 5 members, so that there could be more civility and comity and issue resolution among the members.
For Stockbridge updates, watch future issues. There are a lot of things that were put in place by our progenitors that have slipped away. It is not that we don't have strong enough bylaws. We do. It's not that there wasn't a master plan that absolutely survives to this minute about the care and protection of Stockbridge. It is not that we don't have the proper committees. It is that things have been rekiggled a little bit to the detriment of all of it. And in one way, which we can discuss more later, that is actually what blew up at the June 6th Select Board meeting. Not a kerfuffle between 2 people. At any rate, Patrick, thank you for your service, and thank you for joining us.
And thank you everyone else for their service. And don't let this destroy your motivation. Get more involved in your government. This is your government. Get more involved, more engaged, volunteer more. Do not see this as a situation where you get disillusioned. You know, double down. We need great folks. Thanks.
Thank you.